Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation. I'm excited to be here with you all. Today, we will explore the EDES 113 comparative perspective, focusing on the history of education in Egypt and South Africa. Over the next few slides, we'll compare and contrast these two regions' educational developments, their historical contexts, and key differences. So, let's dive in and uncover how education has shaped these countries over time. Today, we're going to explore how history has played a crucial role in shaping education systems. We'll look specifically at Egypt and South Africa to see how their unique historical contexts have influenced their approaches to education. By comparing these two countries, we can develop some basic skills in understanding different educational trajectories and the factors that drive change. The main purpose of this lecture is to give you a clearer picture of how history impacts education and to build your ability to analyze these differences critically. This understanding will help us grasp the broader themes of educational development across diverse settings. When we look at education, it's clear that it doesn't develop in a vacuum. Instead, it reflects the political history of a society. For example, a country's colonial past often leaves a lasting imprint on its schooling systems. Colonial powers typically introduce their own educational models, which can still influence education long after independence. As societies evolve and social conditions change, so do their educational reforms. These reforms are often responses to the shifting needs of the community, economic demands, or political movements. So, why is it important to compare education histories across different contexts? Well, understanding these historical connections helps us see how education is shaped by broader social and political forces. It also allows us to recognize patterns and differences that can inform current policy and practice. Ultimately, examining these histories helps us appreciate that education is deeply intertwined with the political and social fabric of each society, reinforcing the overall theme that education is a reflection of its time and place. Education transmits values, which means it's not just about learning facts, but also about passing down the beliefs and norms that shape our society. It plays a crucial role in preparing citizens to participate actively and responsibly in social life. At the same time, education reflects the broader structures of power and inequality that exist within society. It can reinforce social hierarchies or challenge them, depending on how it's structured. When we talk about education and society, we're really exploring how education both influences and is influenced by the social context around it. This slide highlights that education is more than just individual development. It's a social institution that mirrors and sometimes perpetuates societal values, power dynamics, and inequalities. Understanding this connection helps us see the bigger picture of how education shapes the fabric of society as a whole. Let's take a look at how education has its roots in ancient times, dating back to around 4000 BC. Back then, the focus was heavily on developing knowledge and skills, especially in areas like writing, mathematics, and science. These subjects were foundational for the progress of early civilizations. In those times, scribes played a crucial role. They were highly respected because they had the skills to read, write, and record important information. Their expertise was essential for administration, trade, and preserving knowledge for future generations. Focusing on ancient Egypt, we see a clear example of this early educational emphasis. Education was closely linked to the needs of society, particularly in supporting the bureaucracy and religious institutions. It really highlights how the pursuit of knowledge has always been valued, setting the stage for the development of more formalized education systems later on. Overall, understanding these early educational practices helps us appreciate how foundational skills like writing and numeracy have been central to human progress throughout history. In ancient Egypt, education was closely linked to religion and the state, reflecting how central these institutions were to daily life. Boys typically received training for roles in administration, preparing them to serve as officials, scribes, or other key positions within the government. This training was essential for maintaining the stability and order of Egyptian society. Knowledge was carefully preserved and passed down through the work of Egyptologists and scribes, who recorded laws, religious texts, and historical events. This helped ensure that cultural and administrative knowledge was not lost over generations. Overall, education in Egypt was not just about learning to read and write. It was about maintaining the societal structure and religious traditions that defined ancient Egyptian civilization. Now, let's take a look at the historical context of Egypt's governance. Over the centuries, Egypt experienced a series of rulers, starting with Persian, Roman, and Islamic rule, each leaving their mark on the country's culture and administration. Then, in the late 19th century, Egypt became a British protectorate from 1882 to 1922. This period marked significant influence by Britain over Egypt's political and economic affairs. During this time, education was used as a tool to serve colonial interests. The colonial powers often shaped the education system to reinforce their control and promote their agenda, which affected how Egyptians viewed their identity and future. Overall, this slide highlights how colonial influence, particularly through political control and educational policies, played a crucial role in shaping modern Egypt's development and identity within the larger context of colonialism. In 1922, Egypt gained independence, marking a significant turning point in its modern history. This newfound freedom paved the way for a broader expansion of public education, aiming to make learning accessible to more people across the country. At the same time, the government took a strong hand in controlling various aspects of national development to ensure stability and growth. These changes set the stage for post-independence Egypt, a period characterized by efforts to modernize and strengthen the nation while navigating new political realities. Overall, this era highlights how independence was not just about political freedom, but also about laying the groundwork for social and educational progress that would shape Egypt's future. Let's take a closer look at the progression from authoritarianism to protest and ultimately to reform. In 2011, we saw a significant wave of student protests across the region. These protests were not just about students voicing their dissatisfaction. They specifically called for curriculum reform, emphasizing the need for education that promotes critical thinking rather than rote memorization. This demand for a more analytical and questioning approach in education played a crucial role in shaping the broader movement for change. Education, in this context, became a catalyst for the Arab Spring, as students and young people sought to challenge oppressive regimes and push for democratic reforms. So, the key takeaway here is how education and student activism became intertwined with the push for political reform, highlighting the power of critical thinking as a tool for societal transformation. Let's take a closer look at the current Egyptian education system. One of its defining features is the dual system, which includes both state and religious education. This setup reflects the country's cultural and societal diversity, but it also presents unique challenges in terms of resource allocation and consistency. Additionally, Egypt has a large student population, which is a positive sign of interest in education, but it also means the system faces significant pressure to accommodate everyone effectively. However, resource challenges remain a major hurdle. These include inadequate infrastructure, limited teaching materials, and insufficient training for educators. All of these factors impact the quality of education and the opportunities available to students. Understanding these dynamics is essential as we explore how Egypt can reform and strengthen its education system to better serve its people and meet future demands. Let's take a closer look at informal education, which often happens through community-based learning. This type of education is really important because it focuses on the transmission of culture and skills from generation to generation. In many communities, especially in pre-colonial South Africa, education wasn't confined to formal schools. Instead, learning took place within the community, through everyday interactions, storytelling, rituals, and apprenticeship. These methods helped preserve cultural identity and ensure that vital skills and knowledge were passed down naturally. Understanding this form of education helps us see how deeply rooted learning is in community life and cultural continuity, which is a key theme as we explore the history of education in South Africa. Today, I want to talk about missionary schooling and its role in shaping education during colonial times. Missionary schools were often used as a means to promote control over local populations, serving colonial interests more than truly empowering learners. They were designed to instill specific values and maintain social hierarchies. A crucial point to understand is that access to this education was highly limited for Black learners. Colonial policies deliberately restricted their opportunities, creating a system that favored white students and marginalized others. This unequal access reinforced racial divisions and inequality. When we look at the broader picture of colonial education in South Africa, it becomes clear that it was not just about teaching reading or writing. It was about maintaining colonial dominance through educational structures that favored the colonizers and suppressed the rights of the indigenous populations. So, in the context of this presentation, these points highlight how education was used as a tool of control, deeply intertwined with the racial and social hierarchies established by colonial powers. Let's take a closer look at how race has directly contributed to unequal schooling. Starting with the Bantu Education Act of 1953, which was a clear example of institutionalized racial discrimination. This law was specifically designed to limit educational opportunities for Black South Africans, ensuring that the system reinforced racial divisions. This ties into the broader issue of racial segregation, where different racial groups were kept apart not just socially, but also in terms of educational resources and opportunities. As a result, there was significant inequality in resources. Schools for Black students received far less funding, fewer facilities, and limited access to quality teachers compared to white schools. These policies and practices culminated in what we call apartheid education, a system that was intentionally designed to maintain racial hierarchies. The overall theme here is how race was used as a basis to create and sustain unequal educational opportunities, which had long-lasting impacts on social mobility and equality in South Africa. Let's turn our attention to the 1976 Soweto Uprising, a pivotal moment in South Africa's history. This was a powerful example of student resistance, where young people stood up against oppressive policies and fought for their rights. Education during this time wasn't just about learning, it became a crucial political tool. Students realized they could challenge an unjust system through their activism and voice their demand for change. This struggle for education wasn't isolated. It was part of a broader fight against apartheid and racial injustice in South Africa. Overall, the Soweto Uprising highlights how education can serve as both a weapon and a symbol in the larger fight for freedom and equality. Let's explore how education reform has played a crucial role in South Africa's journey from apartheid to a democratic society. After years of segregation, the focus shifted towards creating an education system that promotes equal access for all. This meant implementing policies aimed at transforming the curriculum to better serve the diverse needs of the population. The goal was to ensure that every learner, regardless of background, has the opportunity to succeed and contribute to the nation's development. Post-1994, when South Africa became a democratic country, these reforms became even more vital. They symbolized a commitment to equity, inclusivity, and social justice in education. This transformation wasn't just about changing textbooks or policies. It was about reshaping the fundamental values of education to support a united, prosperous South Africa. It's a key part of the broader theme of building a new, inclusive society where everyone has a fair chance to participate and thrive. So, when we look at the idea of a single national system, it's about having a unified approach to education across the country. This means implementing a common set of standards and policies to ensure consistency and fairness for all students. One key element of this is the curriculum CAPS, which stands for Curriculum and Assessment Policy Statements. These are designed to provide a clear framework for what learners should achieve at each grade level, helping to standardize what is being taught nationwide. However, despite these efforts towards a unified system, persistent inequality remains a major challenge. We see that not all students have equal access to quality education, resources, or support, which continues to widen the gap between different communities and socioeconomic groups. This issue is especially evident when we consider the current state of the education system in South Africa. Today, our education system still faces significant hurdles. While policies like CAPS aim to streamline and improve learning, the reality is that many schools, particularly in disadvantaged areas, struggle with infrastructure, resources, and qualified teachers. This persistent inequality hampers the goal of providing equal educational opportunities for everyone and highlights the urgent need for ongoing reforms and targeted interventions. Connecting all these points to the overall theme, it's clear that building a truly equitable and effective education system requires more than just policy changes. It calls for a comprehensive approach that addresses systemic inequalities, ensures proper resource allocation, and fosters an environment where every learner can succeed. Let's talk about colonial influence and how it shaped education in these regions. Colonial powers often used education as a means to control and influence local populations, which had long-lasting effects on national identities and societal structures. Moving on, student protests became a significant part of this history. Students pushed back against colonial legacies and sought to reclaim their cultural identities, often becoming catalysts for broader political change. This connection between education and politics is crucial. In many cases, education systems were intertwined with political agendas, which influenced how history, culture, and national identity were framed and taught. Now, when we compare Egypt and South Africa, we see some interesting similarities. Both countries experienced colonial rule, which left lasting impacts on their societies. Their paths to independence involved intense struggles, and both nations faced challenges in shaping their post-colonial identities amid lingering influences. Understanding these parallels helps us see the broader patterns of resistance and transformation across different contexts. It underscores the importance of recognizing how colonial legacies continue to influence education and politics today. Let's take a closer look at the differences between Egypt and South Africa in their approaches to religious systems. Egypt has maintained a religious dual system, meaning that it recognizes and supports both Islamic and Christian religious institutions separately. This reflects a historical and cultural context where religion plays a significant role in societal identity. On the other hand, South Africa has adopted a single national system, which centralizes religious authority and governance under a unified framework. These contrasting approaches highlight different reform paths. Egypt's dual system has preserved religious independence, but also presents challenges in terms of regulation and integration. Meanwhile, South Africa's unified system aims for a more streamlined, cohesive governance of religion, which can influence social cohesion and policy implementation. Overall, these differences are crucial because they shape how each country manages religious diversity and reform efforts. Egypt's path emphasizes religious pluralism within a structured framework, while South Africa's approach reflects a move towards national unity and centralized control. Understanding these distinctions helps us see how history, culture, and political priorities influence reform strategies in different contexts. Let's explore how youth have historically been powerful agents of change. For example, in Egypt, the Arab Spring demonstrated how young people played a pivotal role in challenging authoritarian regimes and pushing for democratic reforms. Similarly, in South Africa, the Soweto Uprising of 1976 was led by students protesting against racial segregation and education policies, and it became a catalyst for the broader anti-apartheid movement. These examples highlight a common theme. Youth are often at the forefront of social and political transformation. Their energy, courage, and willingness to challenge the status quo make them vital actors in reform movements. Specifically, students have consistently taken on a role beyond just learning. They become active participants in shaping their societies. Whether through protests, advocacy, or organizing, they serve as catalysts for change. Connecting this to our overall theme, it's clear that young people are not just future leaders, they are current agents of change. Their involvement can inspire entire communities and accelerate progress toward justice and reform. Let's take a closer look at some of the resource challenges faced by both countries. One major issue is the urban-rural divide, which highlights how resources and opportunities are often concentrated in cities, leaving rural areas behind. This disparity can deepen existing inequalities and hinder overall development. Additionally, the historical inequalities continue to shape the present. These long-standing disparities, rooted in the past, still influence access to resources, education, and economic opportunities today. Speaking of education, it plays a crucial role in either bridging or widening these gaps. When educational opportunities are uneven, it impacts future generations and perpetuates cycles of inequality. Overall, these interconnected issues, resource challenges, the urban-rural divide, historical inequality, and education, are central to understanding the broader context of inequality in both countries. Addressing them is essential for fostering more equitable and sustainable development moving forward. Let's take a moment to reflect on how history has a profound influence on education. The way education has evolved over time is deeply rooted in historical events, cultural shifts, and societal needs. Understanding this helps us see why certain practices persist and how change can be slow. Reforming education systems doesn't happen overnight. It often takes years or even decades to implement meaningful changes. This slow pace can be frustrating, but it also underscores the importance of patience and persistence. Now, despite this slow process, teachers play a crucial role as change agents. They are on the front lines, shaping students, minds, and attitudes, and often driving innovation from within the system. Teachers have the power to influence not just individual students, but the broader educational landscape through their commitment and creativity. For all of you studying education, these lessons are key. Recognizing the weight of history reminds us to be thoughtful and respectful of tradition, while also being advocates for positive change. Understanding the slow pace of reform encourages patience and strategic thinking. And knowing that teachers are change agents inspires us to take active roles in shaping the future of education. Ultimately, it's about balancing respect for the past with a proactive vision for the future. Egypt and South Africa, despite their different contexts, share some striking similarities when it comes to their struggles. Both countries have faced significant challenges in their political and social spheres, which have deeply influenced their educational systems. It's important to see how these struggles are reflected in the way history is taught. Education often mirrors a country's political history, revealing underlying narratives and perspectives that shape national identity. Understanding this historical context is crucial because it helps us see why certain stories are emphasized or marginalized in the classroom. When we grasp the historical background, we can approach teaching with a more nuanced and informed perspective. So, in conclusion, recognizing the link between history and education is vital for fostering a more comprehensive and honest understanding of these societies. It reminds us that education isn't just about facts, it's about understanding the stories that shape a nation.